in. And it's only fair that if I ask you to listen to me, that I give you a little bit of my background in regards to entrepreneurship. And I think for me, I'm very much like most entrepreneurs. I think you'll see some correlation in relation to you. Because if you have an entrepreneurial spirit, you have an entrepreneurial spirit, and it's not new for you. It's something that you've always had. And for me, my real introduction into entrepreneurship, I can take all the way back to when I was 11 years old. And my oldest sister, who had a paper route, she turned 14, started going into high school and didn't want to deliver the newspaper anymore. And so she kind of turned it over to me. And I took what she had and expanded it tremendously. So I had a whole shopping cart full of newspapers. I used to walk around on Sundays and, make money. And I got bit by the bug. I was just amazed that, creating value for adults when I was 11, which was they didn't want to get up on Sunday morning and have to go get a newspaper, that they would actually pay me more than what the newspaper was worth. And so for me, that was such a big boost in terms of how I wanted to be able to make money. Now, quickly, I learned the difference, though, between entrepreneurship and having a job, because when I was 12, I actually got my first job. I used to work for Chicken Delight. And so I had my job during the week, and I had my entrepreneurship side hustle on Sunday, delivering the newspaper. And I think for most people who are entrepreneurs or have the entrepreneurial spirit, we tend to follow that model, right? We have a job, but we have a side hustle. And a big part of the reason why we don't shift 100% to what we really want to do as an entrepreneur is what society tells us. And I know my parents were big on, you have to get an education so you can have job security. And I tried to follow that model. I went to college, I went to grad school. I had a good job, where I was actually an educator, so I had tenure that couldn't be fired. But even though I did that, I always had a side hustle. And, what I realized is a side hustle will always remain a side hustle and never become a real business, because you can't put the time, energy, and effort into it to scale it to where it needs to be. And so for me, the idea of the freedom of being able to make as much money as I wanted, the freedom to be able to control my time, was more valuable to me than the security of having a job where, somebody told me when to come in, somebody told me what time I could have lunch, somebody told me exactly what time I was going to get paid, somebody told me if I could keep the job or not. That idea of security didn't feel good for me. So as an entrepreneur, we have much more of a free spirit. We are much more primitive, right? And so we decide what our fate is going to be. We decide if we're going to eat or not. We're going to decide how much we eat. And a lot of it is based on our efforts and our ability to communicate what it is that we're trying to accomplish, whether it's to our supporting team or it's to our customers. And so in 2004, I had enough. I left the working world and I became an entrepreneur and an investor. And I'm what you call a serial entrepreneur. So I have had such a variety of businesses. When I talk about variety, I mean locally and internationally. So when we talk about the scale of businesses, some people will say, well, why? But just listen to, I've had a software development company. I've had hostels. I've had real estate brokerage. I've had daycare center. I've had graphic design company. I've had financial advising company. I've had, a martial arts school. I've had, the list goes on and on and on and on. And I had still do have a company that's business consulting. So I've had a range of businesses myself. I even had a store in the Gambia, West Africa, where I sold clothes and electronics. So I've done international business. I've had online businesses. I've had a travel agency. I've had, the list goes on. And as a business consultant, I've consulted even a greater variety of businesses. So since I haven't had a job since 2004, I've been an entrepreneur and investor. I've gained a wealth of knowledge, not only from the time when I started, like most of you, as a side hustle, but as a full-time entrepreneur, I gained a wealth of knowledge. Not every business was successful. And the most valuable lessons I learned were from the ones that weren't successful. And some were wildly successful, where the money was just outrageous and just piled up and piled up and piled up. And so I learned a lot from those endeavors also. So what I want to share with you today is how I've consolidated all that knowledge that I've gained over the last several decades and really put it into a formula, because I believe if you use a formula, you can duplicate, you can replicate, you can apply it to any business, you can scale any business, you can move on to another business if you choose. That's my philosophy. I ride it till the wheels fall off, no emotional attachment whatsoever. And so I want to share that with you today. So I'm going to share my slides. I have some slides I want to. All right. So you got my background story. So let's just jump into it. But I think for you, you have to determine first what your why is, and that's really important, because it's not for everyone, right? And so I think it's important to decide what your motivation is. Are you doing it for the income? Are you doing it to gain time? Are you doing it for creative expression? Do you have some type of noble cause because you want to help the world? You have to decide what your primary reason for doing it is, because that's going to determine how you structure your business, right? And you might have multiple things, but you then have to prioritize what it is that you're ultimately trying to accomplish. So are you trying to make enough money so it's not a side hustle, so that you can be a full-time person and live the life of your dreams and make enough income? Are you doing it because you want to control your time, but the income doesn't matter as much? You just have to share your passion, because some people do it that's their reason. So you have to really decide that, prioritize that. And then, please mute yourself. Then really decide what your exit strategy is. And I think a lot of people neglect that part of the whole design. If you're creating a business that you intend to sell, you will structure it differently than you having a business that you intend to pass on to another generation, or a business that you intend to just maximize the income, or a business that you intend to get investors and shareholders. So how you plan to exit the business will also dictate how you build the business. So that's critically important first. If you haven't thought about that, you shouldn't go into business yet. Then you got to decide if you have what it takes. So one thing that's critically important to understand is that you have 0 transferable skills from school and from the working world. Everything that you learn in school is to make you a good employee. Everything that makes you a good employee makes you a terrible boss. So other than empathy for your employees, perhaps you will get no skills from that experience that transfer to being an entrepreneur. When you are in school, when you are an employee, the priorities are different, right? And so somebody tells you what you have to do. Somebody tells you when it has to be done. Somebody tells you what all the priorities are. And your goal is to just get through that and get paid. And when you're on the other side of that, it's a whole different dynamic, right? And so you're trying to get people to do what you want to make money and keep as much in your pocket. They're trying to get as much money from you as possible. And there's a clash in terms of values. And so totally different skill set, totally different perspective, totally different mindset on both sides. So you'll have to leave. If you're not willing to leave everything you've ever learned your entire life about the dynamics of employee and employer alone, then it's not for you. If you're not willing to then learn a whole new set of skills and adopt a whole new perspective on life, then it's not for you. If you are comfortable where you are, if you're comfortable having somebody tell you what to do, when to do it, how to do it, then it's not for you. If you're not willing to pay attention to the signals that are given from your customers, from the economy, from the political landscape, that means you have to be much more aware. I know people who have jobs, and when I talk about the Great Recession, back in the day, they said, "What recession? We went through a recession." They had no clue. I know people who tell me, "Oh, I don't watch the news because I don't like the depressing stuff going on." Well, okay, but everything, and not necessarily the crime stats, but the political news makes a difference. The world news makes a difference. Whether there's a pandemic, whether there's a war, all these things are going to make a difference and affect your ability to do business. And so if you're not paying attention, if you're not paying attention to the political trends, the social trends, the economic trends, if you're not willing to pay attention to those things and you just want to go with the flow, then it's not for you. The other thing that what's ingrained in you as an employee and as a student is that there's no room for failure. If you fail as a student, then you might get left back, or you might not graduate, or you might not get into the college of your choice. And so failure is a bad thing. If you are an employee, unfortunately, most employers, if you fail at something, then you could lose your job. And so you have to understand, as an entrepreneur, failure is an important and integral part of the growth process. As a matter of fact, you want to fail fast, and you want to fail often, because that's where you will get the lessons that you need to learn in order to be successful. That's where you will gather the most data, the most information. So failure should be a welcome part of the process, which again is totally different than the mindset that you learn as a student or an employee. You have to be open to change and innovation as the market demands. And so if you have an emotional attachment to your product or service, I've had somebody say, "Well, that's my baby. I don't want to change." It's not your baby. Even if it's your idea, your creation, doesn't matter. The only things that are successful in the market are what the market is willing to pay for. And if you're not willing to change your product or service to meet the demands of the market, then you are not an entrepreneur. And you should just create because you want to create, and make whatever you can make and give it away if you have to. If you are afraid to ask for money, then you are not an entrepreneur. Because the number one reason to start a business is to make a profit. And so if you're afraid to ask customers for money, you're not an entrepreneur. If you're afraid to ask people who finance businesses for money, then you are not an entrepreneur. So you have to decide if you have even what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So if you meet those criteria, then you can probably do this. So then you have to decide, okay, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur, how am I going to launch this business? Am I going to do a startup, which is from scratch, which is probably the most popular way, can be the most difficult way? Or do you already have a business and you want to expand it, meaning you want to innovate or completely, change what you're doing? Or are you going to do a business takeover, meaning you're going to buy an existing business from somebody who wants to sell? Or are you going to do a franchise, which is a business in a box, where you just, pay a fee and you run it exactly the way somebody tells you? Or are you going to have a licensing agreement, meaning you can use the name, like Trump does that all the time. Trump doesn't own most of the stuff that it has his name on it. People license the name. And CrossFit just licenses the name, and people actually pay a licensing fee. So we don't have time in the 2 hours that we have to talk about business takeover, franchise, and licensing. So what I'm going to cover in the 2 hours that we have are startups, and if you have a business and you want to expand. So the process is generally the same. I'm going to talk about the slight modifications because it's only the beginning portion that might be a little bit different. So again, I'm a formula kind of guy. So I created a formula that I think that if you just insert it into what you're doing, then you should be fine. If you follow the formula, there's very little room for variation in terms of skipping a step. If you skip a step, you're going to lose. So the first thing that you have to do, and here's where the difference comes in from somebody starting from scratch and somebody who already has an existing business, is not what most people think. Most people have an idea first, and they start a business based on an idea. And what I've discovered is that is absolutely the wrong process. The process should start with identifying a prime target market. And I'm going to go through this formula, and then I'm going to go through how we apply each of those things. So identify a prime target market first, then identify a potential problem or opportunity in that market. Then you decide if you have a solution that is profitable, scalable, adaptable, and accessible. Once you have that theory, because that's all theoretical, then you will create a dynamic plan of how to create that, how to reach the market, how to sell to the market, and how to service that market. Then you will build, acquire a small scale, testable product or service and present it to the market. When you put that small scale thing out, you will test it. You will have criteria that you have in order to test it. You will make adjustments and retest based on the customer feedback. Then, only then, will you decide to either fully launch it, make additional adjustments, or abandon it completely. If you decide to fully launch it, and then you will scale it. So that's the plan. We're going to keep going back to this. So if you didn't catch it all, don't worry about it. But we will keep going back to this because this is the formula, period. So let's just talk about that first thing, identifying a prime target market. We have to think about the different markets that do exist. And you have to decide, is your target market going to be business to business? Because that's something that most people don't consider. Businesses need business too. They need things that are sold to them as well. So will you be business to business, or will you be business to government? The government buys a lot of services and products. Now, when you sell to businesses or you sell to governments, you in general sell a much larger volume. They usually buy things at a huge scale, but because they buy a lot, they pay wholesale. So they'll pay lower prices. So you'll sell much more volume in general, but you'll usually sell it at a lower price. Or what you do like most people, which is business to consumer, which is usually much lower volume, but at a much higher price. So you have to decide that first. If you decide to go business to consumer or business to business or business to government, the next thing you have to do is decide, are you choosing a local demographic? Are you choosing a national demographic? Or are you choosing an international demographic? The demographic that you choose, local, national, international, obviously will change your delivery system. It will change your marketing. It will change how you decide to create the foundation of your business. That's important. Once you decide those larger things, then you have to break it down further into a niche market. So what exactly are the demographics of your business? And if we look at business to consumer, we're talking about gender, we're talking about marital status, we're talking about educational level, we're talking about income level, we're talking about geography, what technology they use. We're talking about a whole range of specific, very specific things, because there's no product or service in the world that is appealing to everyone. And I think that's a mistake that people make. I say, well, who's your demographic? And people say, I want to sell to as many people as possible. Okay, then you're going to make a product or service that's appealing really to no one. So every little detail you can think about the demographics, age, gender, marital status, all these things make a difference. Once you understand that, then you can dig deeper and understand their psychographics, right? Because the psychographics are, what are they typically worried about, right? So what keeps them up at night? What things are they concerned about in the short term? What things are they concerned about in the long term? Or what things are they excited about? What makes them feel good? What things are they drawn to that make them happy, right? And so you have to look at that. What are their objections to spending money? What would make them want to spend money? What is their product or service delivery method that they prefer? right? Because that's important. Where do they look even to find stuff? You know, if it's an older market, do they look online? If it's a younger market, do they look in a magazine, right? You have to really decide what their demographic is, what their psychographics are, and then what their spendographics are. So when I say with spendographic, how much do they tend to spend? How often do they spend? What makes them want to spend? You know, what will make them not spend? What will make them hold back? What are the things that make them go in their wallet freely and the things that don't? So I know that sounds challenging, and those are the unsexy things that an entrepreneur has to do. Those are the foundational mundane tasks, and those don't sound very exciting, but you should not move forward until you've done that work. So I know next question is probably going to be, you know, what if I have a business already? Do I have to go back? Kinda. If you have a business already, you have to go into your database and say, what are the demographics of my most consistent customers, right? Not the ones on the fringes, but who are my most consistent customers? What do they look like in terms of age, gender, you know, all those different things, social status, you know, and then you have to ask yourself, what is the decision process of those customers that makes them want to buy from me as opposed to someone else? And then how much and how often do those people buy from me, right? And so you want to be able to look at your demographic and then kind of go back and then pare it down so that you have a very specific niche market. So it's okay to shed some of the ones who are on the peripheral in order to grow that core group of your demographic who's already buying from. So once you've identified a target market and you understand what makes them spend, why they spend, what they're worried about, what excites them, then you have to look at that market and say, please mute yourself if you don't have a question. What problem or opportunity, right? Because it can be one of the other, and our problems are kind of opportunities, but we just kind of look at them differently. What problem exists in that demographic or that marketplace, or what opportunities exist in that marketplace? And so I'm going to kind of start giving you specific examples of that. I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. I want to give you examples of that. So when I used to have hostels, and that was probably one of the most successful in terms of cash flow businesses I had. And the reason I got into hostels wasn't because I had this desire or passion to be an owner of a hostel. When I did a little bit of research, when I chose a demographic, and you have to remember, or you don't really know, this was the beginning of the recession in America. And there was a recession in America, so Americans weren't spending a lot of money at the time. But Europeans were spending a lot of money. At the time, the euro was 1.5 times the US dollar. And so we saw travel and tourism increase dramatically because America became a cheap vacation. There was also something that went on in the educational system, in the university system in Europe, where for some reason they were out of school for an extended period of time. So there was an influx of young people specifically coming to New York and other places. Now, if you understand the demographic of young Europeans of college age, they often travel around Europe. And when they travel light. They carry a backpack. Most of the time they ride a bike and they stay in hostels. They do not stay in hotels. And so understanding that, these young people suddenly were coming in droves to New York City looking to stay in hostels. When I examined the hostel industry, there was a 10,000 bed per day demand for hostels in New York City. And it was just over 5,000 beds available per day in New York City. So there clearly was a problem that there weren't enough hostels for the influx of people that were coming. So I was like, okay, there's a problem here. So it wasn't a hard decision to decide whether or not to start a hostel. Right? And because I looked at all the hostels that were available, they're all booked up for months. So clearly they're making money. Clearly there's a huge demand for it. But then you have to figure out, okay, how am I going to differentiate myself? Even though there was little competition in that arena, how could I differentiate myself and make people want to come to my hostel as opposed to being the last resort and going to other hostels? So you have to do several things. One, you have to research, right, which I did, the online research, but then you have to ask directly the target market that you are choosing what their problems are and see what opportunities exist from that. And so back then they had all these blogs and forums where these travelers would post their complaints. And the complaints they were posting, they were talking about the room designs, and they were talking about the lack of communal things. They were talking about the lack of experience that they could have other than just sleeping in the place. And they had all these things. And so based on that, I designed a hostel that would visually be more appealing, that would socially be more appealing, that was cost effective, but gave them more amenities that they were looking for. So that became important. So the design came specifically from that. And then you have to also look at the other issues. So a lot of places had issues with bed bugs. They had all these different issues. And so my thing was, in my design, in my offering, my place is going to be super clean. My place is not going to have bed bugs. My place is going to have all the amenities. My place is going to look aesthetically pleasing and be designed specifically for European young people. That was important. So you have to ask directly, and you have to do market research to design the product or the offering that you want to be able to give people. You have to identify the cause or the causes that would make you believe that what your solution is will actually help the problem. Then you have to understand that every product has three aspects to it. And I think the mistake that most people make is they only think of one, which is function. Of course, it has to have function, but when you consider that Mercedes-Benz doesn't compete with Ford, right? When you think of an automobile, the function of an automobile is to get you from one place to another. Just about any automobile can get you from one place to another, relatively at the same speed, because we have speed limits, relatively in the same comfort, because we all have air conditioning and decent seats. But what is the difference between a Mercedes-Benz and a Ford besides the price? So there has to be something else. So we have to understand there's a functional component, but there's also a social component and an emotional component that's attached to it. So what does it mean when somebody sees you driving a Ford pickup as opposed to somebody seeing you driving, a big body Benz? What does it make you feel like when you drive a Ford pickup as opposed to driving in a Benz? And so you have to design, again, knowing your demographic, not just the function of the product, but how does it make them feel? And what is the social status that they gained from it? And so when you think of function, there's certain things you want to consider. Are you going to consider quality? Because maybe there's an issue with quality. Maybe there's an issue with quantity, right? And so again, when I did the hostels, there was an issue with quality and quantity. There wasn't enough beds, and the stuff that was available was low quality. Are you going to compete on pricing? Pricing says a lot to certain people about perceived value. And so are you going to be Walmart? And Walmart and Target are very different in terms of what they offer, except Target costs a lot more. And so if you have a certain social status, you'd rather shop at Target than you would at Walmart. Availability, variety. Maybe there's only a few types of something that you want to offer in terms of product or services, and you could offer a greater variety. Maybe it's the design itself. Is it the ease of purchase? Is it the delivery method, the delivery speed? Is it user-friendly or not user-friendly? So those are some of the functional things that you should consider in differentiating yourself from another entrepreneur. or another business. And then you have to say, well, what emotion does my product or will my product or service evoke to my demographic? Will it be pain relief? I had a debt modification company during the recession because people were afraid. They had credit card debt and mortgage debt and all these things, and they didn't know how to deal with it. And they would stick their head in the sand. And so naturally, it made sense for me to be able, who I'm comfortable dealing with somebody else's debt or even my own, stepping in and creating a service. And I had maybe 10, 15 employees at that time who would go out and they would find all those people who were, hurting because they were in debt, and we would offer the debt relief by settling debts. So again, what are people looking for? Pain relief? Are they looking for joy? Are they looking for pride? Are they looking for confidence? Are they looking for validation of their social status? So those things are extremely important. So when you want to identify the right product or service, consider the function, consider the social status, and consider the emotional thing that will come from that product or service. Next thing you want to do, you want to decide if your solution is profitable, scalable, adaptable, and accessible. So let's look at that. Sometimes solutions are not profitable. Sometimes you can have the best idea, you can have the best invention, you can have the best product or service. It just can't make money. And there's an old saying that if you build a better mousetrap, the world will be the path to your door. But when we look at mousetraps, they haven't changed in hundreds of years. They're basically either a piece of paper with glue on it, or it's some type of either wood or plastic with a spring trap where you put bait on it. And so I'm sure someone could create a better mousetrap, but would people buy it when they have a mousetrap that does what it's supposed to do and it's dirt cheap? So sometimes there are problems and there are things that you can create to solve a problem. They just won't make money. And so that's sometimes why they're not solved. That's why somebody didn't jump into that area. But when you consider something that can be profitable, the number one thing it has to do is meet your income requirements. So if you go back again to why you started, if making money was your goal, you should have decided how much money makes a business worth it, right? And so how much income are you trying to pull from this business? So you can look at that quarterly, you can look at it annually, you can look at it down the road, but how much money is this thing making? Does it meet your minimum requirement? And then you have to decide if it's a good return on investment. So what does that mean? Good return on investment. How much money do you have to put into it to get a certain amount of money out of it? So if it ties up a big chunk of your money, if the cost is exorbitant, then you have to decide, okay, is it worth it for me to put this amount of money in order to get this money out? You also have to decide in terms of effort. Is it a good effort to income ratio, meaning the amount of work I have to do in order to get this money, is that worth it? So if it's profitable, meaning it can make money, meaning it can make the type of money you're looking for, meaning it doesn't tie up a lot of your money or have a huge cost up front. If it doesn't take so much effort, it doesn't feel worth it. If it's profitable, then you put a check. You say, okay, let me move on to the next criteria. Because just being profitable is not necessarily enough. Is it scalable? I think a lot of people underestimate this part of starting a business. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, I'm going to start small and I'm going to build it up later. If you start small and you build it to be small, you will not build it up later. And just to give you something that's analogous, you can't build a foundation for a one-story house and then say, I'm going to put 6 stories on it later because the foundation can't support a 6-story building. And so even if you want to start at 1 story, but your goal is to scale it to 6, you need to create the foundation for a 6-story building in the beginning. And then you can add on, the floors later. So you have to determine if the business has the ability to grow. So when I say grow, I mean exponential growth, not linear growth. If I continue my efforts, will my business grow quickly with the costs coming down and the profits growing as I scale? Will I be able to create the infrastructure to support the growth? And in considering that, you have to consider the lifetime value of a customer. How many times does a customer continue to buy from you over and over and over and over before they don't buy from you anymore? Because it's always easier to sell to somebody you got to buy the first time than it is to keep getting new customers. If you have to keep finding new customers, then it's not really scalable because you'll run out of customers. If you can get a few customers and they keep buying from you over and over, and then you get a few more and they grow and it grows, then that's something that's scalable. So consider early whether or not it's scalable and you have the ability to scale it, and you can set up the infrastructure for scalability. Once you have those two things checked, the next thing is the business adaptable? So when I say adaptable, there is no business that remains viable forever if it does not change, because there are too many factors in the world that change that will make it suddenly unviable. And so can it survive political change? So I told you I had hostels. We had an economic downturn because the credit crisis hit Europe. We had political changes in New York. The hotel industry lobbied the politicians to change the laws so that you can no longer have what they call transitional housing in an apartment building. They wanted us to then start paying taxes like a hotel, so that killed the industry. So those things killed the industry. So that business wasn't adaptable to meet the changing landscape. When we talk about the economic landscape and the political landscape that collided all at once. Can your business do that? Can it survive the political, social, technological, and economic changes that will happen? So what happened when the hostel industry went down, it did create a vacuum because the demographics still existed, and that's when you got Airbnb, right? So Airbnb became the vacation rental go-to, and they were able to use the technological changes to be able to scale the business over a broad range. So can your business survive those things? Does your business have the ability to upsell? Meaning if you have a single product or service, how many times can you sell that to somebody anyway? Can your business model or your product have an upsell, side sell, cross sell? Can it spin off into other products or services that your demographic would be interested in? Can you make price adjustments up or down based on, again, social changes, economic changes? We're going through right now massive inflation, and some businesses are taking a beating because they're either getting a small profit, please mute yourself, no profit, and some are actually running at a loss because the perceived value of their product is not greater than what they can charge. And so if you can't make adjust your price and your demographic be okay with it, then you might want to consider not doing that, because there will always be these changes that go on. And then, is it accessible? And when I say accessible, not to your customer, but is that business accessible to you? Is it regulatorily prohibitive? So it's hard to legally do Airbnb in New York. So even if you wanted to make the transition, because now legally in New York, you can't do Airbnb in a building that has more than two-family building. So that makes it difficult because now you have to pay multiple rents if you only do two-story houses, and then your profits go down. So is it accessible? And then when we look at New York is funny. They have this new, we have this new law that's making marijuana sales legal. And the first people who have access are people who were convicted of marijuana crimes. But the cost is super prohibitive. Like I forget, it's like maybe like $25,000, $30,000 or whatever to file to do it. And you have to show that you've had a profitable, viable business for 2 years or more. So, it's become prohibitive cost-wise, and it's become prohibitive regulatorily wise. So even though it's there, it's hard to gain access to And then you have to decide, well, do you have the skills and the resources, or do you have access to the skills or resources to be able to take advantage of it? And even geography. I told you I had a business in the Gambia, and one of the things that resulted from it was I ended up getting oil rights in Gambia when they discovered oil just offshore of Gambia. But I didn't have the access, the resources, or the skills to be able to take advantage of that. So sometimes there's an opportunity, but there are things that make it inaccessible to you. So profitable, scalable, adaptable, accessible. If all four of the criteria exist, then that is the product or service that you should go with based on what your demographic is suggesting that you need, that they need. Once you do that, you have to create a dynamic plan of how to reach, sell, and service your market. And so when I say dynamic plan, there's a reason I say dynamic. Dynamic means that it's ever changing. You're making it kind of on the fly. And let me explain the difference between that and a business plan. So a traditional business plan is between 35 and 60 pages long. And it is a forecast of how you want to create value for a demographic, how much you expect that they will spend, when you intend to break even, when you expect to make a profit, and projections of profits for the next 3 years. And it is not used for you because you don't need a 70-page plan. It is used to raise money. It is used to show people who might give you money that you have this plan that you believe is viable and can make all this money, so it makes sense for them to give you money. We are long before that stage. So dynamic planning is for you. And the further ahead that you project, the more likely you are to fail because the world is changing so rapidly. So you don't have to forecast far ahead. What you need to do is forecast, not even really forecast, you need to plan for right now, in the moment, what you're going to do to be able to create a test model for yourself. So in this plan, you have a general idea based on what your demographic told you of what the product or service should look like. So let me just go back, because I know some of you are probably stuck on, well, where am I getting this information from my demographic? You have to, again, research and ask. And so to give you a few examples, we are in a time today where you can quickly and easily get real-time data from a demographic of your choice. And if we just use social media as an example, or LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is part of social media. So if we use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, even YouTube, if we just use those things, there is a group or an easily identifiable demographic that you can find on any of those platforms. So if you just use Facebook and you say, I want to find the demographic from London, England, who are beginners in photography, who spend X amount of dollars on this, you can find that on Facebook. There is a group for that. As a matter of fact, once you join that group, Facebook will give you a list of other groups that are similar, and they will show you all the demographics for that. So you can start looking at those groups and commenting and asking questions, and then you can create your own group that meets those same demographics. And Facebook, all those other things, Instagram, they all have analytics when you start your own group, and they will tell you exactly who your demographic is. And so you'll have that information. Then Facebook and Instagram, all of them also allow you then, once you have a group, to create surveys. So you can create surveys and ask, you can put out content and see how people respond to it. You can direct message people in the group. You can do all these things and collect real-time data and find out exactly what people are interested in. You can find out exactly what people are complaining about. You can find out exactly what's missing in people's lives. You can find out exactly what scares them. You can find out exactly what brings them joy. You can see what other businesses are marketing in different groups, in different pages. So it's not difficult for you to get real-time information and just ask people exactly what it is that they want. So that should be quick and easy. So that shouldn't even be an issue. So you have an idea, you should have in your plan exactly what the product or service should look like. You should have an idea of how you intend to create or acquire the product or service. You don't have to create everything. You can actually acquire it. And a lot of people do that when they start businesses and sell on Amazon, right? They're kind of a middle person. They can get it wholesale and sell things retail. So you can get somebody else to create a product or service. I have a good friend. He and I I wrote my book. When I was writing my book, he said, I want to write a book too. But he doesn't like to write. And so he hired somebody from Upwork and he just gave them notes and they wrote an entire book for him. And he sold his book and he got his book to market before I did. And so you can figure out how to, again, create or acquire the product or service that you want to present to your market. You have to figure out what personnel, what suppliers, what providers, and what support team that you need to be able to pull this off. You don't have to know a person to have them on your team. And so again, Upwork is a great resource. If you didn't write that down, write it down. Anything pretty much you need in business, you can find on Upwork. Again, from people who will do design for you, people who will write for you, people who will market for you, people who will, any legal aspects, anything in business that you need, even write a business plan for you. There are people who will do that for you and you can look at their portfolio. So you don't have to have a real or personal relationship with somebody to bring them in on your team. You just have to know the skills that you need and know where to go to get it. So of course, we have Fiverr for certain things. There's a whole range, depending on what you need, where you can find people. And again, you can find people in those groups, go on social media and say, hey, I'm looking for someone who does X, Y, and Z. So finding people, service providers, is easy. Finding skilled laborers is not difficult. Finding, creating a team because of technology is easy. I have people work for me in India while I'm sleeping, they're working. When I'm awake, they've already sent me an email of the work that's done. So it's not as difficult. I think what we forget is technology closes time, space, and cost, right? It keeps costs down. Somebody in India is a lot cheaper than somebody, in New York City. So once you figure out all the people you need and how you'll get them on your team, you also have to figure out how customers are going to locate you and your service. So meaning, how are you going to market, right? How am I going to find customers and how are they going to find me? So you create a marketing strategy also. Then you have to figure out in your plan, how am I going to test my product or service? And we're going to have a whole slide on that. So I'm going to get into that. But how do you plan to test your product or service? How do you intend to finance your initial rollout? Because even though you can keep things at a low cost on a shoestring budget, things do cost some money, right? And so how am I going to finance this initial rollout? And let me explain this to you. I have people come to me all the time. When I started a corporation, I'm going to get investors. You will not get investors if you have not tested anything. The test is on your dime. The rollout or the scaling is on somebody else's dime. Your company is not worth anything. You have no proof of concept. You have no proof that your idea is worth anything. An idea is worth 1% of the value of a business, and 99% of it is the execution. So if you can't prove that this thing can be profitable and scalable, nobody's going to invest in your business if they're a real investor. So you have to figure out a budget and you have to figure out how you're going to finance your initial testing. Then you have to figure out, if that testing is successful, how you'll raise capital, right? So you'll need capital and or credit. And how do you plan to do that when you scale? Within that plan, you have to determine what has to be done first. What are the priorities? And how will you know that you're on track? So what has to happen first? I have to have a product idea first, maybe, or maybe I need to get a team first, or maybe, so you have to figure out what the priorities are. And again, when you have a job, somebody does that for you, but now you have to figure it out. What are the things that tell me I'm on track? Then you have to create a strategic plan for each of those objectives, right? How am I going to execute this? How much is it going to cost to do this? When do I have to have this done? What are the obstacles and challenges to that particular piece? Once you've done that strategic plan, you have to create a time frame for this thing. When do I need to start or want to start? When do I need to have this part of it done? Because some opportunities are time sensitive. They don't last forever. And if you don't get to market on time, some things are seasonal, some things, again, we go through these economic changes. And if you don't get it out in time, I had a software development company. This guy, believe it or not, this black guy from Harvard, who created this software for real estate investors to be able to qualify properties. And this was in 2000, I want to say 2005. And partner and I, we got together and we financed it, and we actually bought the rights to the technology from him. And in 2006, we had the housing crisis. We went through the bubble burst. And so we didn't get it to market in time. And so we ended up with this fabulous software, because everybody thought there was a real estate investor in 2005. We had this fabulous software that in 2006 was totally useless because we weren't able to get it and test it in the market in time to be able to take advantage of the opportunity that existed. So timing is important. If there's an opportunity, you got to seize that opportunity. So once you've created the plan, you need to build or acquire a small scale testable product or service and present it to your market. So what does that look like? You have to live by the adage, test small, lose small, test big, lose big. And I know a lot of people want to skip this stage and go right to market because they have such passion and belief in their own idea. That would be the biggest mistake of your life, because that means you'll go all in, you'll put all this money in, and if it, and I tell you, in 99% of the cases, that first thing you launch is not good enough. You will go all in and you'll have a product or service that doesn't work. And the flip side of that is, I've consulted with a lot of people. And there's some people even on this Zoom who I've given advice to, and I tell them, and they try it, and they say, well, that didn't work. And they abandon the whole thing without deciding, what did I learn from that? Why did it not work? What did I do wrong? Or what did I do right? And let me try again. They just totally walked away. And that's that same mentality of not being an entrepreneur, being an employee, or being, oh, it didn't work. There's nothing that's going to work perfectly. So you have to test it in the market so that you can tweak it to make it a good product. So I say, and this has been my method, before you even create a physical or tangible product or service, you should advertise that product or service, advertising the benefits and the features that that demographic will get from the product or service, and see how people respond. If they don't respond, don't create even a test model, because it's a waste of time. And I'll give you an example of that. So years ago, my number one product that I used to sell was a product called Insider Secrets to Near Perfect Credit, because so many people have bad credit and they want to improve their credit. And I only came up with that product because, again, I was teaching real estate investing, and I got to the point where we talked about financing the real estate. And I asked the people in the class, well, when I started talking about financing, their faces all got really glum. And I was like, well, what's the problem? And somebody said, well, we have bad credit, we can't finance it. And I said, well, fix your credit. And nobody cheered up. And I was like, well, just fix your credit. You know, credit's just a snapshot in time. You can fix your credit. And then the hand went up, well, we don't know how to fix our credit. So I said, well, if I create a product that shows you exactly how to do it step by step, and even has the, you know, the sales letters in there, because back then it was you had to send in letters on a in Microsoft Word on a CD. That was back then. Would you guys buy it? And they said, yeah, I would buy it. I said, would you buy it for this price? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll do a pre-production sale and I only charge you this amount if you'll pay now. And a bunch of people bought it. And so I created the product only because people demonstrated, not only in words, but in action, that they were willing to pay for it at a discounted rate, even before the product was created. And that went on to being one of my #1 selling products for years. So back then I had the 1-800 number you call, and I had the ads in the back of magazines, and it was a huge success. And I was able to scale it because I had real estate agents and mortgage brokers who bought the product and were selling it to their clients, and it scaled tremendously. But I would have, if I had the thought, oh, I should create this credit fixing product, I would never just launch it until they said that they wanted it, and until they demonstrated that they really wanted it by doing pre-production sales. I didn't create it at all. So you should really consider, mitigating your risk by putting it out there and seeing the type of feedback that you get. If you get positive feedback, and even if you get negative feedback, then ask people why. Well, what would you want instead? How should it look? What's the price point you would pay? Right? Get that information first, and then based on that, you'll create a small scale sample of the product for the people who are willing to try it. So that's important. And even when we go to, some of you have information products, and that's important because there are different types of ways to break into this, right? You can have an information product, you can have a service, you can have a physical product. And even with an information product. So when I wrote my book the first time, what I did was, well, first I asked people if they wanted me to write a book. They said, yeah, I want you to write a book. I was like, okay. So I wrote a book. And then I took a sample of my demographic and I let them all read it before I published. So I got feedback, not only from an editor, because I hired a professional editor who gave me some advice. And then I gave it to this control group and let them read it, of my demographic. And the feedback that I got blew my mind, because I wrote the book the way I would want to read it and the language that I like to hear, but it wasn't the language that my demographic wanted. It wasn't the order that my demographic liked to see it in. And even the editor warned me, nobody's going to read that book because you need to put the juicy stuff up front. And so the book that I actually published was not the book that I initially wrote. And the book that I actually published was a big success because of the feedback that I got from the demographic. And so it's important, again, before you put it out, is this what you want? Get a small test. Is this okay? And even with going back to the hostels, what I did, I had this idea to create what Airbnb ended up doing. Instead of having just beds in the hostel, I had another building and I said, let me just do suites. Because sometimes there's families who want, a whole suite. And I did a test run on it, and I did a control group, and I said, okay, you can stay here and give me feedback. And they gave me feedback, and I had a whole building of suites long before there was even an Airbnb. So again, it's important to test small, lose small, test on a small scale, get feedback, and then, move from there. So test, adjust, retest. So what does that look like? You have to have a criteria when you're testing to decide whether or not the product is going to be viable, right? So it's not just getting feedback. It's like, okay, if I get certain feedback, I'm going to launch it. If I get other feedback, I'm not going to launch it. I'm going to make adjustments and test again. And so that could be how fast this thing sells. It could be, the delivery method. It could be, people telling you this thing is not functioning well. It could be a quality. It could be a whole range of things but you have to create this criteria for your product or service that says, okay, if it meets the criteria, then I know I'm good to launch. But you also have to have a system for receiving and analyzing customer feedback. If you just give it to people and expect them to say something and you have no means for them to give you feedback, then you won't get any feedback, right? And so whether you're doing, again, a follow-up survey, whether you're following up with them on social media, whether you're following up with them directly by email or phone call, there has to be some means for them to give you feedback, right? And then there's feedback when there's no feedback. If you don't get a return sale, if you don't get a repeat sale, if you don't get, if this doesn't scale because people told somebody about it, if you sell way too quickly, all that is feedback, right? So if you get no or very low sales, then you have to decide, well, was it my marketing? Did I not market this well? Because maybe if I tweak my marketing, I'll try it again without changing the product. I'll just try changing the marketing. Um, and if you still don't get any sales, then it's like, okay, I'm going to try marketing it again, but I'm going to change the price. Maybe it's not competitive with the prices that are in the market. Try that. Or maybe you just have totally the wrong demographic that you chose. Maybe that isn't the demographic that will buy that product. And so maybe you try a different demographic with the same product and the same marketing at the same price point. At any rate, you only want to tweak one variable at a time, because if you tweak multiple things, you don't know what it was that made the difference. So if you got more sales than you expected way too fast, then maybe you should raise your price. And I know some of you say, no, well, that's a good thing. No, it's not, because you won't be able to keep up with the demand. To be able to scale when sales are coming too fast, they'll come faster than you're able to keep up with the demand. And then it will hurt you because you won't be able to fulfill people's wants, and then they'll go somewhere else. So if you sell super fast, you might have something there, but you probably want to raise your price. If you receive consistent complaints about the product, listen to what the complaints are and make the adjustments, right? And so when the consistent complaint I got about my book was, I don't understand this language. One lady told me, she said, I'm an English teacher and I don't understand half the words in here. And I really, and I hate to use the term dumb it down, but I had to change the language, because when I read a book, I'm excited about new words and stopping and having to look them up. But most people are not. And that wasn't what they bought the book for. They weren't looking for a dictionary. They were looking for a how-to book. So I had to change it to meet the level of expectation of the people who are reading the book. It's very, very rare that you'll have to make no adjustments. I don't think there's ever been a time where I've launched any product or service where it was perfect for the bulk of, and it's not going to be perfect everyone anytime, but it never has it been perfect for the demographic that I chose. So there's always been some type of adjustment or modification that has to happen in order for it to meet the criteria of your demographic, to meet the income level and quality level and all that other stuff that you want for your product or service. Do not try to make it perfect. You will never make it perfect. Don't wait to test it until you think it's perfect. The sooner you get it out and get feedback, the better. And that's what I was talking about, failing fast and failing often. As soon as you have something that's usable, get it out there. And I know some people worry about the feedback they'll get. Don't worry about the feedback. Feedback is good. If people don't like it, they'll tell you why they don't like it. That's good. And it gives you an opportunity to fix it for that person. So that analysis paralysis thing is real. I'm a recovering perfectionist, so I know how debilitating it can be, saying, no, wait's not ready yet. No, wait's not ready yet. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be even good enough for you. It has to be good enough for the demographic. So that's important. So make sure you get it out there. So the next thing on the formula. So let's just go back again. Identify a prime target market. Identify a potential problem or opportunity in that market. Decide if your solution is profitable, scalable, adaptable, and accessible. Create a dynamic plan of how to reach, sell, and service your market. Build, acquire a small-scale testable product or service and present it to your market. Test, adjust, and retest based on customer feedback. And then it's the next thing. Decide whether to launch fully, make additional adjustments, or abandon completely. So what does that look like? I know that's a scary one. So at that point, you're at the point where you're going to either strategically, and I say strategically, because this is all based on strategy. Nothing you're doing was random or based on emotion, right? It's all strategic. Are you going to strategically shift directions? Are you going to strategically push through? Or are you going to strategically abandon the idea? So what does that look like? So to strategically shift, you've done your testing and it just looks like this is not the right product or service, right? You tried to tweak it, you tweaked the pricing, you tweaked the demographic, you tweaked the product over and over and over, and it's just not a product that's going to meet your criteria in terms of profitability. So you shift. So it's a purposeful change designed to test a new hypothesis. So because it was only a hypothesis until you tested it. So you're going to test a new hypothesis. So you go back to the drawing board and you create a new product or service. And then you go back to that same process. You bring it back to the market, you test it. So it could be, again, a small part of the whole process, or it could be the entire product or service just has to be changed. So that's a strategic shift. Then we have what we call a strategic push. If everything is on track, everything is on track. You tested it, you've tweaked it, it's ready to go. You push forward with your plan, and then you're ready to bring it to the market. And then you have strategic abandonment. The number one thing you should never do is squander resources on a product or service that's showing signs of going nowhere. If all the signs are there, you can't breathe life into it. Let it go. And I know for a lot of people, for emotional reasons, that's hard, but you should never have been that attached to it at all, where you're at the point where you have to go down with the ship. Don't go down with the ship. You know, if it doesn't work, let it go. Don't waste a dime. Don't waste another minute, because you can go back to the drawing board, pivot completely, go to a totally different direction, go to a totally different demographic, try a totally different business model, just try something totally different and put your efforts there. Every business does not make it. Every business is not viable. Some businesses take off and then they die. You know, so that's just the process. And being, if you're an entrepreneur and not just somebody who's attached to their passion, then you won't be emotionally attached. You'll be able to adapt. You'll be able to adjust. You'll be able to move seamlessly to businesses that are very diverse and don't even seem connected. So I know you guys have been really, really quiet. Before I go to the next slide, I just want to know if anybody has any questions so far about anything that we have talked about, or anything that's unclear. Oh, so everything makes sense. Okay. So if you're, go ahead.
It looked like Matthias was trying to talk. I don't know. Were you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Matthias, you have a question?
You might need to type it, Matthias, because we can't hear you.
Or just unmute yourself. Where can you unmute yourself? You're unmuted, so we should be able to hear you now. Nope, something's wrong. Can't hear you. You're gonna have to type it, I guess. I heard something. Try talking now. Did you pull the headphones out?
Yeah, they connected.
Yeah, okay, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, they connected. Yeah, I just touched it. Yeah, my question was basically everything that's being said so far. It's guided, or seems to be guided more like a business to consumer, or like the same applications could be for business to business. As what you're saying, like.
Okay, so good. Yeah. So the process is the same, whether you're talking about business to business, business to consumer, business to government, because it's making, you know, it's funny, a lot of people who get government contracts don't actually have the product yet. right? Because what they'll do is they look at a government will put out specs of what they need, and a company will send back, oh, this is what we can create. But it doesn't make sense for a company to create that product or service unless they get the contract, right? And so it becomes the same thing. Or when it's something that a company can bid on, they can put in a bid, they'll create a prototype, just a prototype. And if that prototype doesn't get accepted, then they'll strategically abandon or look for another demographic. So it's the same thing. Same thing when you're selling to businesses. If you look at a business that is missing something. So in the case I was talking about real estate investors, they're not consumers, they're a business. That's a business. They were looking for ways to quickly qualify properties, right? A way they can just punch in data and it spit out, the answers that they needed. But it was contacting people first and saying, hey, would you like your life to be easier by, having this thing? Okay, what type of things do you have to qualify or are you looking for in something that would do this? And then it was having a guy develop that, the software developer create that. So the process doesn't change. And I know it's the way I laid it out sounds like only business to consumer, but the process is exactly the same no matter who your demographic is. Yeah, thank you for that question. Any other questions?
Hi, Haru. This is Shawana. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Okay. This is Shy, so
Hi.
nobody
Yeah,
feels
how are you? Yeah.
Okay. I'm good. Are you going to teach us on a more extensive level? Because I can consume
I
the
guess
rest
you
of
want me you just want me to get to the next, you want me to get to the pitch already, right? I was just making sure everybody had, enough understanding of what we were doing. So, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
sorry.
that's fine. That's fine. Let's just get to it. If there are no more questions, we're just going to get to the nitty gritty.
Okay.
Let's get to it. So the only thing left on our formula is scale, right? It's a scale according to the plan. And obviously we don't have time. That's a whole different set of skills when we talk about scale, right? Because that's different set of planning, different set of financing, different set of everything. So I'm not going to go into the scaling, but I'm going to talk about how you can learn how to scale, right? So I want to give you what I call success insurance. And we have to understand that becoming an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, is not a mystery, because I just laid out the formula, but it's like a puzzle. And you can have all the pieces to the puzzle that you want. If you don't know how to put those pieces together to create a bigger picture in time, then you will not be successful, because we live in a super fast, rapidly changing world, and timing is critical. So if you can't put those pieces together in a timely way to be able to take advantage of opportunity, there'll be an economic shift, there'll be a natural disaster, there'll be technology change, there'll be political shifts, there'll be all these changes that will keep you just behind where you need to be. So to avoid the critical errors that you can make, to speed up the learning curve and to be able to take advantage of what a seasoned mentor can offer you, then I have a 6-week course. It's going to be live streamed, and it's going to be on Wednesdays from 7 to 9 p.m. starting October 12th. So we're talking about not just one day, we're talking about 6 weeks. And what will we cover? Understanding the market data so that you can choose the right demographic and the most profitable product or service. Because I know when I said it today, some of you are still going to be lost in how do you find the right data, and how do you sift through that, and how do you make sense of all the information that you find? I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. You see, I have a very scientific approach to planning, testing, and growing. We talked about the basic structure of the beginning stages, but I'm going to show you the beginning, the middle, the scaling, and the end, because you should have an exit strategy. How are you going to get out of the business? Are you going to create it and grow it to sell to someone else? Are you going to pass this on to future generations? Or are you going to hit a certain mark in terms of income and retire? Like, what is it? Or are you going to just have it run, forever and have other people working in it until you pass? Like, what is your plan? I'm going to show you how to create that plan specifically in order to create, test it, and grow the business. I'm going to direct you to the best resources for your business, whether you're talking about suppliers, whether you're talking about human resources, whether you're talking about financial resources. I'm going to show you, so that cuts down on a lot of that, tedious trying to find and qualify. I'll show you exactly where to go. I'll show you how to finance your business. And again, the testing is on you, but the growth should be on somebody else. And I'll show you how to raise that money if you have something that people want to invest in. I'll show you the best marketing strategies based on your demographic and the product or service that you have, so that you can reach the demographic you want. And again, grow the business so that it makes the type of money you want. I'll show you, this is important, how to manage your business for success. You can't just start a business and be hands-off and think it's going to run itself. You can't have a business and think that even having a manager is enough. You have to know how to manage the manager. So that's important. You have to be able to protect your business proactively from market shifts, from natural disasters, from political changes, from social changes, all the changes that are inevitable. You have to proactively put things in place to be able to make that shift. You have to be able to adapt and adjust. And I'll show you that and more, everything you need to be successful as an entrepreneur. Again, I want to emphasize, I've had a variety of businesses, and I've consulted on a variety of businesses, and I will never have a job again. So that's important. So why invest in the course? Faster growth and less mistakes. The support and accountability to ensure that you stay focused, because I will stay on you. Up-to-date, innovative information and strategies that can jumpstart any business. Anybody who knows me knows I am up to the minute on everything that's happening politically, socially, economically, and I will be able to share that information so that you can make the proper adjustments. And I'll give you the ability to master all the aspects of a profitable business, not just how to start it, but human resources, finance, operations, management, all of it, the whole gamut. And I think one of the most important things is, I tell people all the time, if you're with me, my resources are your resources. So you can have access to whatever resources I have, you have access to. So I'm going to throw in some bonuses. If you pay in full, then I'm going to give you 2 business plan reviews. So that can be a dynamic plan and or your plan to make money down the road. And I'll give you 2 one-hour consultations specifically about your business, any aspect of it, and what you need. If you need an installment plan, you can get an installment plan. But I don't think most of you are going to need an installment plan because it's dirt cheap. But you can break it into 2 payments 30 days apart. So you're like, okay, well, geez, how much is that? I want to do my throwback price. The first time I ever did this course, way back, this was the introductory price. I did it for $399. So I'm telling you, I'm going to give you 6 weeks. I'm going to give you, if you pay in full, all the bonuses. I'm going to give you access to my resources. I'm going to ensure that you're successful as an entrepreneur, whether you have an existing business or you are starting a business or you want to create new products and services in your business. And I'm going to throw in 100% no hassle money back guarantee, like I always do. If at the end of the course you tell me that's not for me or I can't use it, I'll give you every dime back, because that's important to me, because then you'll trust me. And then if I have another course that's more for you, you'll probably do that. So I'm going to give you the bonuses. If you do it one time, if you pay in full, I'm going to give you an opportunity to pay in installments if you need to. You get all of that. And to make it happen, all you got to do is send me an email right now that says I'm in. And if you need the payment plan, just in the body, put the payment plan, and I will send you the payment links or the registration form, and we will get started on October 12th and go 6 weeks straight. So I'll be looking for those emails, and then like I said, I'll send you back a payment link and the registration form, and we'll get rolling. So if you've ever dreamed about being an entrepreneur, if you're already an entrepreneur and you want to scale, this is exactly the thing for you. So Lisa has a hand raised. What's that? Yes, Lisa.
When are the classes? Are they in the evening?
Oh,
You
7
say
to
6
9, Wednesdays,
Okay.
and we go back to that. Wednesdays from 7 to same time, Wednesdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for 6 weeks straight, 6 consecutive Wednesdays.
Okay. Thank you.
Haru, this is Shawana again. One more question.
Sure.
Will it be recorded?
Absolutely. Every class will be recorded. I'm glad you asked that because we're doing it on Zoom. And immediately after the class, I'll send you the slides and the video recording. And if you miss a class, don't worry, you can watch the class and you can email me your questions and I'll be able to answer them for you. So,
Okay, thank you.
welcome.
This has been very helpful. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. So if there are no more questions, I'll be looking for your emails. If you have a question after, again, you can still email me at the same email address. And I look forward to having most of you, in the class in 2 weeks. So everybody, thank you for participating. If you know somebody that might be interested, let me know because I can send them the recording for this. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. If not, I'll see you on the next go round and have a good night.